Hey there, folks. Welcome to The Healthy CEO. Today's guest is Dr. Will Haas. Now, I want to say from the outset that whenever I start the video, you're going to see that we're kind of already into the conversation. That's because during our kind of opening chit chat, I forgot to hit record on the video portion of the interview. So I apologize. If you're really interested in that little bitty tidbit of chit chat at the beginning, you can go to the full episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But anyway, you didn't miss anything. It was just us kind of doing the get to know you stuff right at the beginning of the episode. So a little bit about Dr. Will Haas. Dr. Will Haas, MD, MBA, is redefining what it means to age well. He is the founder and CEO of Vive Wellness in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he helps high-achieving professionals reclaim energy, focus, and vitality through cellular optimization. Board certified in integrative and family medicine, Dr. Haas blends advanced therapies, IV nutrients infusions, therapeutic peptides, hyperbaric oxygen, and red light therapy to deliver measurable results that help patients feel decades younger. Beyond Vive, he co-founded Ovulife MD, creating natural fertility protocols, and serves as chief medical officer and infusive supporting wellness practices nationwide. His expertise has been featured in Men's Journal, Daily Mail, Yahoo Life, and Women's World magazine. Passionate about bridging science with practical results, Dr. Haas empowers high performers who want more than just longevity. They want their best years ahead of them. This is a wide-ranging conversation. Will is a brilliant guy, big old brain on Dr. Haas. I hope you enjoy this. And hey, if you would, don't forget to click like or subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. And if you happen to be listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, by all means, leave us a 5-star rating, and also leave some comments, leave some questions for Dr. Haas. I know he'll be checking it, and I'm checking it constantly. And so if you have questions, put them in the comments, and I'll make sure he gets those. And with that, enjoy this conversation with Dr. Will Haas. Thanks for listening.
I was 13, right? I'll date myself a little bit. You said I look young. I'll take that as a compliment, and then I practice what I preach. But, I remember watching the 96 Olympics and watching Michael Johnson just crush some world records and just being fascinated with, okay, what are the inputs that have to go into the human body to be able to achieve that sort of performance, and just really kind of dialed my thought and thinking in, especially as an athlete myself, kind of competed semi-pro as a triathlete earlier in my career, and then got involved into some other sports as I had to change throughout my medical career. But it really kind of came down to, what were the inputs? Well, what do you have to eat? What sort of supplements do you need to take to achieve that? And got to medical school and realized that's not what medicine was really about, right? It's about treating disease and kind of putting band-aids on things. And this kind of concept of nutrition and supplementation and mind-body medicine and it's foreign and not even spoken about. And the only place I could really find that resonated and spoke to this was the field of integrative medicine. And that's kind of what initially set me down that path, was this pursuit of health optimization in a space that didn't talk or speak about it. And Andrew Weil became a very important mentor of mine. And I think the interesting thing you talked about was medicine 2.0. And I think the thing that I actually always resonated and respected most from Andy was the fact that he didn't believe there's this other type of medicine, or that there's this evolution of medicine to 2.0, or that there even should be such a thing as integrative medicine. I think in his viewpoint, it's just good medicine.
Yeah.
Right? It is good medicine to draw from, every potential, healing modality, right? To address the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. To have these conversations and dialogues, right? And you don't need to necessarily biohack yourself or reinvent medicine. Or for him, he didn't even, really wanted to create a whole new specialty of medicine. He's like, this is the way things should be practiced. And that really stuck with me early in my career. And Yep. That was the only place I really heard that sort of talking about. So into the world of integrative medicine I went.
Well, brother, I tell you what, that gives me hope because it's one of the things I push for. I'm actually the president of a foundation called the Access to Health Foundation. And that's one of the things that I'm actually working with AFPI on some of these measures in DC right now for policy that moves us more as a country toward healthcare versus sick care. Because to your point, you go to medical school, and whenever I found out the very limited amount of time that you guys actually study nutrition and some of these things that actually benefit staying healthy, it's
What's the
really kind.
statistic? 1 hour, I think, is what we get in on nutrition.
It's
I think it's
crazy. It's crazy, man. And so for you, and this is my hope. Like one of the things I'm arguing for in DC all the time is that more medical schools will, as part of this, I want to make general practice great again, because we need guys and gals like you practicing medicine early on in the standpoint. And to me, and maybe this is a little bit of kind of a far-fetched dream, but I think every primary care doc, general practitioner, whatever you want to call it, should have the background and education and the understanding that you do. It's interesting that you mentioned Andrew Wild. So you may have met along your road. Again, all these physicians that have either been on the show or that I've crossed paths with. Ailey Cohen, she is a friend of mine and a friend of the show. She actually is a mentee of Andrew Wild's. And so I agree wholeheartedly with his methodology, which is like, hey, why don't we, it's almost kind of like he was even before David Sinclair started talking about treating aging as a disease or somehow, it's like, if you're healthy, doesn't mean you have to wait till you're sick to take on some of these protocols and some of the things that guys like you and I do. Like I have my, did my ice plunge and do all these goofy things that you don't have to do. They're not panaceas, but I don't do an ice bath because I'm sick and I'm trying to get better. I do an ice bath because I want to help myself mentally and I want to regulate my glucose levels and that sort of thing. So let's jump into some tactical applications that someone walks into your practice, Will, and like, for example, for me, I think that, and this is I'm kind of the avatar of my show. It's mostly, younger than me. I mean, you're probably younger than I am. I'm 51, and most of the audience is between 30 and 60 entrepreneurs, pretty type A, hard charging guys that are interested in health and wellness, and not just lifespan, but health span. Mm-hmm. So when people come to your practice, what are some of the first things that you're going to talk to them about? Some of the questions that you would ask, some of the things that you would do to find out where they are, to get those benchmarks, to get them to meet the goals that they may have for their health.
Yeah, I think there's questions and then there's diagnostics, right? Kind of falls into one of those two buckets. And the first thing I'm always going to start to assess on the lifestyle things is just kind of really kind of get an understanding of the foundation that I'm working with, right? So before we dive into things like the cold plunges and the peptides and the things that I'm sure you're excited to talk about today, I need to understand, the foundations of sleep and nutrition and stress and social connection, those sorts of things. Because in the absence of those, I don't have a strong foundation on which I can build upon with my patients. All right. So, if I get that high performing, 45-year-old executive who is literally banging away on the laptop until 11 o'clock at night and then up back at 5 o'clock and skips breakfast, grabs fast food, or a lot of people know fast food's not healthy for you anymore, but they're still not eating kind of nutrient dense deep meals, lunch, dinner, that sort of thing. It's a very different conversation than somebody who is truly doing all the right things, right? Somebody who is kind of eating appropriately, kind of a Mediterranean style diet, or, kind of getting the supplements in and getting, restorative 8 hours of sleep. It starts with a different conversation. But regardless, I'm going to use that alongside some diagnostics as well.
So let me ask you this. Of those things, because the things, again, but if you had asked a physician, say 10 years ago, even maybe, this question, they probably wouldn't have answered like, well, I talk about their sleep. I talk about their stress. I talk, they're just going to, I mean, they probably, again, they'd be looking to diagnose something. You came to me, you've got a problem they're diagnosing. What do you find are some of the biggest, are you kidding me, doc, moments that your patients have when they discover the impact of a certain let's just call it tactic, whether it is improving sleep, whether it is improving caloric deficit, or there's some things that whenever people start to talk to you about these things, that they're just like shocked that it has such a needle moving capability to their health?
Yeah, I think the thing I kind of want to maybe back up a little bit too is the diagnosis of a disease. And to me, I'm starting to listen to these conversations with my patients in terms of cellular dysfunction patterns. So, what sort of patterns am I seeing bubble underneath the surface when I hear somebody is not sleeping 8 hours a night, right? Am I hearing patterns of, energy production problems, right? Are the mitochondrial cells, the cells that produce our energy, are they struggling for reasons they're not getting the right inputs? Um, so I start kind of always thinking from that lens of like what patterns am I hearing from cellular dysfunction. So it's not that like, we kind of throw that doctor mentality out of like, what am I not diagnosing? It's more of what patterns am I looking for? And I think that is the pattern that I probably see most frequently that patients are kind of a little shocked and stunned about, which is this pattern of mitochondrial dysfunction, meaning they just don't have the cellular energy they need to repair and optimize themselves. And once I can get my patients to have that light bulb moment, then suddenly the conversation starts to shift.
So that's one of the things that I love to kind of, now, granted, people aren't going to listen to me and they should not listen to me the way they're going to listen to you. But whenever people start asking me questions, just if they know my background, they know this show or whatever, and they start asking me something about like what supplement should I take or some nonsense like that, that's just a very, I need the lightweight questions, but really we need to go deeper. And one of the things I always start to talk about is cellular health, to which, I, as a layperson myself, when you start to talk about this, people are kind of like shocked that you don't want to talk about supplementation. You don't want to talk about some physical modality of exercise, or something like that, or you don't start talking about the biohacking things that are sexy and everybody's talking about. Instead, you start talking about cellular health and mitochondrial health, and like I mentioned before we got on the show, talking about phospholipids and the cell membrane. Kind of give this audience, and man, this is something, dude, double click and go as deep as you want, because I think it's so important. And it was the most exciting thing whenever I was researching you, is that you talk a lot about cellular health. It can't be overstated. So talk to this audience about what cellular health means. Go ahead. I mean, they probably haven't, everybody says mitochondria. I was watching Rhonda Patrick here recently, said that, basically everybody just throws in the word mitochondria to sound like they know what they're talking about these days. So talk about how important mitochondrial health is, and then link that to some of these things. I'm sure that some of your patients come in and they share with you that they're just feeling lethargic. They're not sick, and they might not even be really overweight, but maybe they're in their 50s and their energy levels have dropped, and you see that this could be a component of their cellular health. Let's just talk cellular health and how to maintain healthy cells, the things that can impact cellular health in the negative as well as the positive, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah. I think we could take this maybe to start this conversation off, or this part of the conversation off, with the second part of my origin story, right? And maybe some of the viewers may see themselves in my story, which is kind of at the age of 41, where I had spent a lot of time studying about integrative medicine and kind of understood all the right things to do and felt like I had my sleep and nutrition and stress kind of dialed in. I found myself across from one of my long-term patients who was seeking advice, and I was thinking through a fog. I just could not pull my words and thoughts together on somebody who's relying me to think very quickly. And that's kind of one of the things I pride myself as a high-performing professional, is the ability to kind of connect the dots very quickly. And there's just this fog I couldn't think through, right? And on paper, everything looked pretty good, right? So then that's where cellular health starts to tease apart, which is, yeah, like my inflammation wasn't through the roof. I had maybe a little bit of insulin resistance showing up. My hormones were fair. These sorts of things that you would commonly go to your annual physical exam. And that's what really kind of started to open up my eyes to the power of cellular medicine. And as we'll talk about kind of peptides down the road, but it is this kind of foundation of which a lot of these other high performers come to me kind of feeling that kind of burnt out, tired, exhaustion that sleep just won't touch, and they just aren't quite as clear and sharp as they used to be. And to me, that kind of starts to scream, you know, don't have enough cellular energy, right? These cells that are designed to produce energy. But I think the layer D, you told me kind of like double click, which maybe go one step before that, which is what is causing the mitochondria not to function well in the first place? And one of the kind of the other eyebrow raising and shocking moments for a lot of my patients comes to this concept of toxins, right? And I know that this shift is kind of moving towards just talk about mitochondrial health as the buzzword. And I think it's important that we're looking at that because the cell can't repair itself if it doesn't have enough energy,
Right.
right? But the cell can't produce enough energy if it's constantly getting bombarded with toxins, right? So there's kind of this concept that you have to redox before you repair, but then you have to detox before you can redox,
Yeah.
right? Redox being this production of energy and balancing the needs of the stress on the cell from producing energy, right? The producing energy itself creates damage to the cell, right? It's this idea that you're kicking off oxidative stress, and everyone's like, "Oh, just pop some antioxidants and CoQ10 for mitochondrial health." Well, okay, but if you kind of constantly have noise polluting the mitochondria, you're never gonna kind of adequately generate that energy, so you can then repair and optimize. And so I think when I tell my patients, I talk to my patients, you first almost kind of need to go back. What are the areas that are kind of detox, creating toxins within the system? And I think on a cellular level, one big area we definitely see will be gut health, right? So is your gut creating basically inflammation? Kind of chronic low level inflammation. Is it disrupting your immune system? So we talk about cellular health. Two other big things beyond mitochondria: inflammation. And what's the source of that? Gut health being one of them. Immune dysregulation, gut health being one of those, right? And if we then look at maybe some other things, environmental toxins could be another big one, all right? And I think one of the scary statistics out there is 50% of residences or commercial buildings, are believed to have water damage, containing mold and mycotoxins that enter our body. And those mycotoxins penetrate into the cells and disrupt the cells and damage the mitochondria and the phospholipids that you kind of alluded to earlier. And so, what sort of toxins do we need to kind of start clearing out because they're creating this inflammation, this inflammatory milieu environment within the cell that then disrupts the immune system, right? And then the mitochondria start to damage, and the mitochondria can't do its job of regulating the immune system and resolving inflammation. So now you kind of see how kind of the parts and pieces all kind of start to communicate with one another, and that's kind of the fascinating thing to me about cellular health and cellular medicine is it's not in isolation. These cells don't kind of live off on an island by themselves. They communicate with one another, which is kind of the beauty of, and we can get to it later, but peptides communicating with those cells to get them to kind of function optimally.
So I want to kind of lay a path to the peptide conversation. And I'm glad you brought up toxins because again, it's one of those things that I think that a lot of people take for granted just how, and it sounds pretty bad to say we live in a very toxic world, but it's just our water, our air, the food, walking on grass that has the different fertilizers and stuff on it. It's just everywhere. So we're in this kind of toxic bubble. I mentioned Ailey Cohen. Her first book was Non-Toxic, and Being Healthy in a Toxic World, I think was the book. It's a great too, by the way. It's just a great handbook on some practical applications of how you can start to detox your environment. But I do think it's one of those things that people don't understand is that this modern habitat and environment with all its robust amazingness, it also is kind of working against us. So let's talk a little bit about, all right, so I've decided I've listened to Dr. Will Haas, and I get it. I want to start cleaning up my environment, and I want to do it nutritionally. I want to do it environmentally. But I know that even if I do eat 100% organic, and even if I do have all the cool filters and reverse osmosis in my house, all these cool things, I realize there's still going to be some extra help I'm probably going to need because I just can't control for every environment that I'm going to be in. So let's walk through some of those tactical applications, Doc, that this audience can apply with regard to environment, nutrition, physical movement. If you want to, again, go a little bit deeper on the gut. I love having conversations about bifidobacterium and butyrate and all those cool things. I mean, I was so ignorant to gut health a couple of years ago. And now that I've really started to focus on it, game changer. My immune system is so much better, inflammation lower. I had no idea. Just my cellular performance and being more efficient, being able to take the calories in and get way more out of them. I don't have to eat as much because I think I've got a healthy gut. All these things have made such a difference to me. So let's talk about some of these actual practical applications in any of those categories that people can start like doing whenever they stop listening to this podcast. They start checking off a checklist of here's how you start to defend against these toxins in an effective way.
Yeah, it's probably the most practical thing before you get into like brass tack strategy is you need to get tested, right? Because I'm a very much 80/20, which is I don't know where to start, putting all of my 20% effort on the 80 thing that's probably creating the most damage to the cells if I don't know what that is, right? So you can be out there kind of randomly ascribing to, oh, I got to get a whole house home filtration system for the air quality in the water, and your head can start spinning, right? Or you ascribe to the YouTube of, or the Instagram of everyone needs a parasite cleanse. Well, do you really?
Right.
Right? You don't know until you test. So you need to test is I think the first jumping off standpoint. And working with a knowledgeable practitioner will help guide you what you do need to test. Right. You don't need just to go spend thousands of dollars on testing. I think having a conversation with a knowledgeable integrative and functional medicine practitioner can kind of help guide you of what patterns, again, back to the conversation I heard of, I'm listening for patterns of cellular dysfunction. I'm listening for patterns of gut dysfunction and mitochondrial dysfunction or inflammation. That will kind of send me down the direction of, hey, I think you should get a urinary toxin test looking for heavy metals or mycotoxins. Or no, I really do think we should get a stool test here. And you should truly ascertain whether you actually do have a parasite, or maybe you just have an imbalance of good and bad bacteria in your gut, what we call dysbiosis. And that will kind of start sending us down the direction, because if you have mycotoxins in your system, the most practical thing is identify where you're getting exposed, right? If you have dysbiosis, the most practical thing might be looking at what's causing that bacteria to flourish, right? Do you need to, change some of the foods that are kind of going into your system, or remove some foods from the system? So we can kind of get practical, but to me, it always starts with knowing what practical tools and solution I need to put in there to have the biggest lift with my patient.
I love it. And now, you're talking about nutrition. Are there some foods out there that you should always consume that are going to be, whether it's either because they're high antioxidant content or just other things that make these something that, like for you, some staples of your diet that specifically, yeah, they probably like the way they taste and you get some calories from it. But also, you're looking at this, and I know it sounds trite now and kind of cliche, but this whole food is medicine, which I'm a big believer in. I just don't like to use all the buzzwords, but it is, food is medicine. So are there some of those things that you eat on a daily basis that you're like, hey, this is my dose of nutrition to help combat some of these toxins that I might be exposed to?
Combat toxins. I was gonna say dark chocolate, but I can't tell you dark chocolate
Ooh.
combats toxins. Because if you're
Don't tell me that, because I that's why I always have plenty of at least 70% dark chocolate. I'm just telling myself it's for the antioxidants.
yeah, and if you're not careful with your sourcing of that, you could be introducing heavy metals into your system, right?
Exactly. I learned
So
that the
it's a,
hard way.
kind of a crazy world out there, is that you even think you're doing something healthy, and you really have to spend some time kind of looking, right? But I think if you have to get back and through and think of what kind of helps support healthy detoxification within your body, right? And we can trip into the whole conversation of, I didn't even talk about methylation genetics, and I'm not overly huge in methylation. But I do think it's an important thing. I just think it kind of gets blown out of proportion. But could you be eating foods rich in those foods and kind of B vitamins? Yes, but if you have the methylation defects, then we need supplements to kind of come in. So, food and then supplements are the other kind of piece of that, but I kind of digress. Foundationally, enough hydration,
Okay.
right? Like you cannot detox your system if you are not well hydrated, right? If you're not, that hydration is not supporting lymphatic flow, which helps clear toxins. If you're not hydrated enough to have good, regular, healthy bowel movements, you're not going to clear toxins. If you don't have enough hydration to sweat and eliminate that way, you're not going to clear toxins. So I know you kind of asked food, and I answered with adequate hydration and water, but I think that's something when I listen to a lot of busy, high-performing professionals, we don't get enough water, right? We just so busy on to the next thing. And then if we do get water, it may be in balance between the amount of electrolyte needs that we have because, we went to hot yoga in the morning and immediately went on to the 10 other meetings we had. And but it's noon and we forgot to drink anything, much less replace the electrolytes that kind of pull that fluid into our cells so they can perform effectively and they can communicate with the other cells. So, dark chocolate, adequate hydration. And then the other kind of nutrition piece I think is interesting is, you can't just, it gets a little bit personalized. So if I have a patient dealing with dysbiosis or small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, I wouldn't tell them necessarily to eat the same foods from a Mediterranean diet that I would with somebody who had a healthy gut because it may actually be fueling the bad bacteria in their gut. So there's definitely kind of more personalization. I think anytime you hear somebody telling, probably short of the Mediterranean diet, even though I just gave you the example of why that might not be the case, but anytime you start hearing people blanketly saying like keto, carnivore, paleo, right, and that is the way to eat for everyone, kind of throws a bit of a red flag to me, and you haven't truly kind of looked at what the needs of the individual patient is in front of you and kind of tailored and personalize that because you could get these healthy foods that could be making matters worse. Like for my patients with poor gut health and small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, like Brussels sprouts, big no-no, right? But from a Mediterranean diet standpoint, they're a cruciferous vegetable, right? They have anti-cancer benefits and properties. So it's definitely going to come down to kind of some personalized recommendations, but you can never go wrong with, I think, enough hydration to support healthy detox.
I think that's great advice. I got to ask you, what's the cleanest dark chocolate that you found?
I think Etho ranks up pretty clean.
Okay.
Unfortunately, one of my favorites, like Lint, is not up there.
Yeah.
I love a good 85% Lint,
Yeah.
but that's up there on like kind of some one of the dirtier lists. But I think Etho is one that I enjoy the flavor that ranks highly.
Yeah, mine for the longest was I thought because it was organic, I was doing good was Alter Eco, and then I found out
Mm.
it ranked pretty high on metals. But the one that I found that does rank consistently pretty well is Hue.
Yep.
It's been up there.
Get
It's
to
been
enjoy that flavor though. Hugh's a little different.
yeah, exactly. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, and none of them are cheap either. That's one of the problems. Now, I want to tell you about my Goop that I've started eating every day. So and I got this from I think his name's Dan Yo. He's a guy that I started following, and he was the first guy that I heard talk about psyllium husk as part of getting enough fiber. That's one of the things that I'm trying to do, like to both feed my gut health as well as fiber. And I haven't talked to anybody about this. This is my own creation that I came up with. I wanted to have the psyllium husk, but then I was like, I looked at my diet and I was like, I'm not getting a lot of fiber other than I always have at least some blueberries and blackberries every single day. But I really wanted to up that. So here's what I'm doing. I want you to kind of score this as like overkill or maybe it sounds good. So I'm also kind of a eat the same thing every single day kind of guy. So here's what I'm doing. Um, I've gone to the 2% Oikos Greek yogurt, and then I'll put 2 tablespoons ground chia seeds, 2 tablespoons ground flaxseed, half a teaspoon of the psyllium husk, a teaspoon of apple fiber, and then also for the gut, I'll put a teaspoon of dried green bananas. And then I mix all of that up again with the Greek yogurt. And then I'll put blackberries, blueberries, and then maybe just a little bit of walnuts in there. Do you and is that good? Is it overkill? Do you hear anything wrong with that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that little concoction that I'm now stuffing in my face every day?
I think it depends. And it depends on two questions.
Okay.
One, was your gut messed up in the first place? Two, do you enjoy it?
Yeah.
They'll get my patients that'll come in and they'll do all sorts of crazy things. They're like, Doc, I hate this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here, right? And how sustainable is that if you absolutely hate it, right? So maybe you enjoy this goop. I imagine you enjoy this goop. The
I do.
goop didn't sound
I
half
like my
bad,
goop. I like my goop.
right? The goop sound didn't sound half bad. So it's
Oh,
kind
and
of
by the way,
like
I forgot to tell you that I'd also put a scoop of whey protein in it. I left that out. That's kind of like a core ingredient. So anyway,
if that was my goop, I'd probably be adding like another scoop of cacao powder or cacao nibs in there because that's what
okay.
goes in my goop in the morning. My
Okay.
2% Greek yogurt has
All right.
a heaping serving of cacao nibs in there as well. But no, I think 80%. I like it. I like it,
Okay.
Jason. I think there's a few things that I'm like, maybe overkill for the dollar, right? The other thing I might be looking is like, how much does this goop cost
It's a
to
pricey bowl.
make? So you could definitely probably like peel some of that out and leave more of the natural things. The food is medicine in there, as opposed to like the pure kind of supplemental things that may lack some of the nutrient dense foods that like in isolation. I think one thing we miss with the supplements is, and the beauty of food is medicine, is there's all sorts of other phytonutrients and things in there that we don't even know the impact of,
Yeah.
right? Right? Is it really some of the actual kind of elements in some of these quote superfoods, or are there other ones we haven't even studied that have the positive health impacts? So if I were to do anything in terms of changing things, sometimes I usually like pull out some of the fine reduced kind of powders and whatnot and lean more into the chia seeds and the
Yep.
flax seeds and some of the whole foods that you kind of mentioned. But the second part of that, Jason, was did you need to in the first place, right? Was the gut function all that poor or not? As the other piece.
Yeah, and no, and I haven't had a gut biome test in probably a little over a year. I'm probably due one. No symptoms, no inflammation to speak of, all regular and all that good stuff. And got into a conversation the other night at dinner on a trip about the a good stool, and in conversations like this, it's kind of appropriate, because it is it is kind of an indicator of what's going on with your system. But at dinner, it's kind of funny whenever people start asking you these questions, and before you know it, before the meal comes out, you're talking about stools and stuff. But anyway, I haven't had a gut biome test in a while, so it was really, for me, it was kind of a combination of just trying to maintain the healthy gut, as well as get some extra fiber in there. And so,
So
well,
do you need to take it to that extreme? Probably not, right?
yeah,
Like, do I like the idea of like, hey, I'm gonna have a meal here that fundamentally supports my gut health? I think it's a fantastic idea. It's just again kind of these ideas of extreme, and we didn't even get into yet even kind of the concept of there's this the concept of stress and energy. We have talked about kind of cellular energy, but what also else feeds into the cellular energy is just how much attention we have and how where our attention gets pulled and stripped everywhere. So I do see people chasing all these different areas of health optimization, and then that can lead to kind of burnout and overwhelm and stress, and that taxes the mitochondria. So I go on a bit of a rabbit hole there, but all to say is I'm a very practical kind of practitioner, if you will, where I'll really kind of ask the questions of does your body need this, and how much of it does it really need to move the needle in the direction we're trying to go.
yeah, and I think that's where let's take that. That's a great segue into supplementation, and then we can go into the peptide conversation, because it's one of those things that I told you about Authentic Health, my company, and how that all came about. And because I'm in that business, a lot of people will ask me, what supplements should I take? And back to your point earlier, it's like, I'm not going to tell you. I don't know. I have no idea what your blood work looks like. That's like, I have no earthly idea. And that's why, and I also tell people, I'm like, I'm not going to just start saying, hey, this is what you need, because this is how you end up with a pantry full of stuff that you don't know why you bought it in the first place. You listen to some podcast and some guy said that NAD was the next big thing. NMN, you read David Sinclair's book. Now NMN is going to give you longevity and all this nonsense. And so it's one of the things I don't do. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's like, you have to you have to get some of these screenings and tests and blood panels to figure out where the heck you are. And so again, it's one of the things I like most about your background and why I wanted to bring you on. And so to the audience out there, if you want to simplify some of this stuff, if you're tired of feeling this overwhelm, go to someone like Will Haas and figure out where you are. Don't give yourself a bunch of supplementation for something that maybe you're just off the charts for. It's
Oh,
kind of
yes.
silly, right? And you're wasting money, and it's no good. But I do want to go into some of the supplementation that you think, again, sticking with this theme of cellular health, of defending against toxins, that you would say are almost universally, you see it in your test. I told you that's how we came up with our stack with Gus's practice. I'm sure you see the same thing, that there's just these patients that come in and it's like, man, look at that. Almost that 80-20 rule. I can almost guarantee you that 80% of my patients are going to have this deficit. And so therefore I need, whether it's vitamin D, C, what are some of those things that you see that probably most people listening to this, if they took this from nutrition and environment, and they did want to start applying some supplemental health, tools to the kit, what might those be?
Yeah, the foundational ones that if you ask me, what do I see when I test all of my patients with advanced micronutrient lab panels, which is what I do, I'm always going to see probably three big ones, two at the very least. So magnesium, vitamin D, and surprisingly, B12.
Yeah.
I'll see as well. B12 or folate, especially if you're kind of one of the 20% of people running around with the MTHFR gene mutation. So that can be the fundamental ones that I see all the time. And I think vitamin D kind of just gets chalked to the side. It's one of these ones that we all know we kind of need, but I don't think the majority of us understand why, or why you need it. All right. And I think a lot of times we're kind of trained like bone and joint health, vitamin D. Okay, like bone and joint health is not really going to catch up to me. That doesn't impact me on a day-to-day basis, but we forget that it kind of acts a little bit more as a hormone in the body, right? So, if you have low vitamin D and you're waking up, and you just kind of have this melancholy cloud over you and your kind of moods just kind of flat, that could be vitamin D,
Yeah.
right? If you start having issues with elevated blood pressure, right, and increased risk for heart disease, that could be vitamin D. So vitamin D is going to show up in a lot of different places and across the board. When I even worked at Tucson, Arizona, when I was in fellowship with Andrew Wild's fellowship in Tucson, Arizona, arguably gets more sunshine than San Diego, right? All of my patients walked around with a vitamin D deficiency. Right. So that's a clutch one. Magnesium, important when over 300 kind of cellular processes and pathways within the human body, essential for mitochondrial health, like we talked about. And that one, also we don't get enough in our diet. And we can kind of go into, we don't have time to go into the whole impact of why the foods we even put into our bodies are no longer as nutrient dense as they once were. So we see that with magnesium, and then just the ability to our earlier conversations around, are you absorbing enough of those, all right, from healthy gut function? So magnesium commonly, and that's another thing why I see, I think some of the B vitamins are commonly low, is because so much of that is absorbed in our upper intestines, right? And if we do have that imbalance of good and bad bacteria and dysbiosis, we're not absorbing that, or we don't have enough of the good bacteria whose job is to actually produce some of these in the first place. So there's be some foundational ones. There's, I think, some sexier ones that I might throw in. Everybody's, I think, in a similar vein. Do enough of us get enough of healthy omega-3s in our diet? We kind of know the standard American diet is skewed much more towards omega-6s than omega-3s. I know that's kind of not a new topic, but I do see that as foundational across 80% of my patients or so. And so that's really important for the system. Some of the other ones, I think it depends on what the micronutrients show, right? I think antioxidants get a lot of attention, like CoQ10, especially when we talk about mitochondrial health. But the thing about antioxidants is that they're in balance, right? There's this concept that we talked about earlier around redox or energy production, and the fact that the cells that create energy, the mitochondria, they kick out oxidative stress and production of energy. And the antioxidants are designed to kind of balance this. So there's kind of this yin and yang. If you kind of like overdo the antioxidants, right? You're not actually benefiting the cell, right? Because you need kind of this kind of balance for the cell to produce that energy. So although I love CoQ10, I don't think that everyone should be taking. If I do see patterns of mitochondrial dysfunction, CoQ10 is definitely going to kind of bubble up into my one of my tools that I'm going to use, and um, not opposed to using some of those precursors like you talked about, MNN or NR, for to support kind of mitochondrial health if I see that pattern of strain. But now when we kind of start going that direction, I really do need some data to kind of help guide me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too. That's what's so important whenever you get into that realm with people that just start, again, they hear Andrew Huberman talk about it and decide, okay, well, I gotta get that. Andrew Huberman takes it. Well, even Andrew Huberman will tell you it's very specific to his needs, which he's very dialed into. So now let's go into the conversation of peptides. So GLP-1s, obviously, that's probably where a lot of people, I mean, you and I, we, again, because of the world we live in, we've heard about peptides of all different stripes for years. I'm sure you, especially as a practitioner, most people on this listening to this, they know at least something about peptides because they've heard about GLP-1s. But give the audience kind of your take on when did you become bullish on peptide usage as a way to battle aging, to promote health span, and some of these. I mean, I really am, and again, not a physician, not making any recommendations here, but I'm bullish as well. I haven't seen enough evidence of any downside to some of the amazing things that can come as a result of peptide usage. I've done the Wolverine stack for a quicker healing whenever I had a surgery. Did it help that much? I don't know, but I was like, well, I'm going to hedge my bets because I want to get better as quickly as possible. But what are some of the, give the audience kind of like, I guess, just a little tutorial on what we're talking about when we're talking about peptides and some of the, and if you want to go into some of the kind of, there is a little bit of a, I don't want to say political, but there's some people that are very bullish and there's other people that are very like, wait, come on, what is your take on peptides and how do you use them in your practice?
Yeah, I think that kind of your take on peptides or my take on anything outside the realm of kind of quote conventional medicine. Going back to a conversation that we had earlier around my mentor and some of his thoughts and philosophies. So Andrew Weil kind of always the way he evaluated things at a time where he got raked over the coals for a lot of things back when he first came out, talking about some of his concepts and ideas, which is the way he kind of views things within the limitation of kind of conventional analysis of interventions, which is, you know, what is the level of evidence for it? How much evidence do we have out there? And I won't go into the limitations of how studies are developed and the influence of big pharma. We don't need to, we've had that political conversation, but what is the actual evidence level of evidence? Does it have an actual physiological explanation? Like, does it mechanistically make sense, right? What's the ability for it to create benefit? What's the ability for it to create harm? Right. And I think that's the piece, that we kind of start looking at when it's going to go layers deep when we don't have as much studies to guide us. Right. And I mean, I'll be the first person in the cellular medicine space to say we know a lot about the cellular pathways that these peptides are working. Do we have the high level of randomized controlled trials that you would for FDA approved medications for a lot of these peptides? In most cases, no. Even the ones that have FDA approval don't have the same degree of studies done on Lipitor, right? Like Tesmorelin is commonly talked about as one of the non-GLP-1 peptides that has FDA approval, right? How many studies were actually done on that one? Not a ton, right? But do we know it has a mechanism of action that makes sense for what we're trying to use it for? Yes, right? Is it been shown to likely cause a lot of harm? No, right? So there's other ways I think of evaluating tools that haven't gone through a rigorous randomized control industry sponsored trial, right? And so that's where I kind of start thinking through because I take that same kind of conversation, apply it to other tools beyond peptides as well, right? So when I'm thinking about incorporating a new tool into my practice with my patients, hyperbaric oxygen, another one, right? It has 14 FDA approved clinical indications, none of which any of my patients come to me for, right? No one's coming for me because they have, a gas embolism. So yeah, that's just, I think, important to have that sort of conversation. But to your original question, what got me intrigued about peptides? I think the very first thing that kind of raised my eyebrow 15 years ago was when I was in medical school, when GLP-1s were actually first coming out, right? They've been around for 20 years or so now, right? And in medical school, I started seeing their use in diabetics, where they kind of started to get their first FDA approved indication. And the thing that struck me wasn't the fact that the patients had better blood sugar control or lower A1Cs. It was the fact that they were losing weight, that they were less inflamed, that I could take them off their insulin, right? And insulin's a peptide, right? Peptide created in 1922, or so. But insulin and diabetics, to me, what I saw in a medical student is it creates more inflammation, right? And if you have inflammation within your system, as we talked about earlier, that's just going to disrupt your whole cellular balance between the immune system and the mitochondria. And that's what really kind of intrigued me. Was I started then going from medical school into residency. And your residency is kind of an interesting time where you're a doctor, but you're not really a doctor, meaning you have somebody else overlooking your work at all times and telling you how to practice. And so when I wanted to start taking all of my patients off of insulin and putting them on a GLP-1, I was kind of scolded and reprimanded, right?
Yeah.
As a resident, be like, no, you can't do that, right? Like textbook medicine says their A1C is above 10, they need to be on insulin. I was like, no, I think this is doing the patient a disservice. You're creating more inflammation, right? That insulin is driving more visceral body fat, which creates more inflammation, right? And I was like, well, what are we doing here? And so that's when I got really excited about peptides. Was GLP-1s way before semaglutide and tirzepatide, and now the new buzz everyone's talking about, retatrutide, right? Um, so that's what kind of first peaked and grabbed my attention. And then, I think that other area that kind of really kind of struck was the story that I talked about when I was 41, which is, okay, so I'm eating clean, I'm taking all the right supplements, and that's still not working. What's going on here? And it became less about the peptide and more about the cellular pathways, right? That mitochondrial dysfunction, and how do I start helping the cell produce energy again, produce clean energy, produce reliable energy, even though I had no intention of working any fewer hours, or being any kind of less stress. I can modulate that stress later, but I'm sure I'm speaking to your audience here, Jason, right? Which is like we're wired to run hard, and higher performers don't accept a world in which that is the case. So how do I start? Allowing my cells to perform more optimally as I age and I continue to push my body like I was 20. That was the other thing that kind of really kind of hooked me into kind of peptide, was really kind of how do I support cellular health?
And so what did you look at, and just, for someone like, again, myself, if when it comes to looking at these peptides, what are some of the ones that make for more efficient or better performing cell signaling and mitochondrial health? Like, are there some specific peptides that you recommend for your patients as they start to see the things that you're seeing? Again, you know, 51 years old is my age, so it wouldn't be unusual for me to come into your practice and say, "Hey, doc, I feel lethargic. My libido's not in good shape. I've got belly fat, and yeah, I want to get the belly fat gone. I want my libido up." And then I know you'd look at my hormones and all that, my testosterone levels. But
Yep.
then, if I tell you, but I want to go above and beyond, because I don't just want to produce something more. I want to be able to do more physically, and so therefore, talk to me about peptides. What do you say to that patient?
I think you kind of started to allude to it, which is what's happening with that individual patient. And I don't have a favorite peptide stack, and I don't have a favorite peptide stack for every patient, because I think when you start talking about in stacks, you actually just are talking about conventional medicine in disguise, right? Which is like, oh, let me take this symptom and tag it to that peptide, right? Right? How is that any different than you have high blood pressure? Here's your blood pressure medication, right? As opposed to what cellular pathway am I really trying to optimize? And because I think about peptides in terms of categories of cell signaling regulators, right? Which lever am I trying to pull to help the cell do its job better, or function more optimally? And you really just can't talk in terms of stacks that way, right? I can talk about, hey, I want the immune system to function better and regulate better because it's kind of gone amok because we have too many mycotoxins in the system, right? Thymosin alpha 1 may be a good application there, right? To you brought up, an earlier point, which is, I have an injury or I had a surgery, right? Do I need to mobilize more growth factors? Do I need to mobilize more kind of tools for repair and keep inflammation levels low? Like, okay, in that case, BPC and thymosin beta 4 could be a potential good application for that. So cellular pathways determines, do I need immune regulating? Do I need mitochondrial support? Do I need inflammation tissue repair? Do I need circadian rhythm support? I think if you did have to pin me down and talk about one peptide for kind of moving into the optimization phase, I'm a big fan of using Epitalon. I think in terms of just not just from its ability to protect the end caps of your DNA, which is a big one of the 12 theories of aging, right? Is just kind of the deterioration of the DNA and DNA damage, but more of its ability can also help regulate circadian rhythm and kind of reset our circadian rhythms and how important circadian rhythms are for every cell function process. Not just kind of controlling when you go to sleep and when you wake up, but kind of hunger cues, right? Right. The circadian rhythms affect those hunger cues, and we know that people who work night shifts, right, not only cortisol is disrupted, but their hunger cues are all thrown up because leptin, adiponectin, and ghrelin are all messed up. So epitalon would be one I kind of throw into the optimization bucket when we have other areas of cellular health functioning well.
And talk about circadian rhythm a little bit. And I'm wondering if you had an older patient, I'm thinking right now of a real life family member who is 80 years old and her circadian rhythm is just all jacked. And I'm talking about her appetite is all screwed up. She forgets to eat. Her sleep patterns are a disaster. I mean, and I know that as we age, it's why a lot of older people are up at 4 a.m. is because their circadian rhythms and a lot of and they don't eat as much and all these different things. Is this something that if you start to get into those upper years and you want to maintain a very effective and efficient circadian rhythm so that you are remembering to eat to get that really necessary protein at all ages, but especially as you get older for the bone density and all that, and also to get proper sleep? Would that be something that you look at in your older patients as well?
Yeah, I think you kind of again listen to the patterns and that you describe, right? So I'm always thinking again the pattern pathway, right? I'm hearing um, you're concerned about bone density, right? I'm hearing you're concerned about healthy appetite to eat the right things. I'm concerned about disrupted circadian rhythm sleep cycles at night, right? I may actually gravitate away from Epitalon and move more towards a growth hormone releasing peptide in that case.
Okay.
One that I know is going to increase bone mineral density. One that I know is going to increase IGF-1 and stimulate appetite. One that I know is going to help build lean muscle mass if you're getting that older individual to consume adequate protein and do resistance exercise training, which is going to have a much bigger domino effect than like let's just tinker with the sleep. But back to the earlier part of the conversation, I'm gonna want to start at like why are those things going on, right? You talked to me about an 80-year-old. I'm gonna start thinking about what are they iatrogenic causes? What is conventional medicine or somebody else potentially doing to that patient? I know tons of medications are going to disrupt circadian rhythm, including medications that are designed to help you get to sleep. They're probably the biggest offenders, right? Antidepressants, blood pressure medications, right? They could all be disrupting circadian rhythms, right? So you kind of starting, and I kind of put those in the bucket of toxins as well, if you will, right? Toxins doesn't have to be mold or a parasite. Toxins can be like what else is being fed into the system or influencing the system so it doesn't work optimally as well. But so you got two parts. You got a peptide in response, and then you got back to the detox before you redox and repair the cell.
Got it. All right. Now let's talk about you a little bit. I mean, this is what you do on a day-to-day basis. So, and again, I know a lot of people hate to hear about the expert's daily routine as far as physical fitness, environmental, precautions and nutrition, all that. But I like to hear it because I think there are some things that are universal. So let's talk about you, Doc. Like, what are some of the things that you're doing nutritionally, physically, keeping your sleep dialed in? What are you doing on a daily basis to make sure that you are staying as optimal as possible in your own health?
Yeah, kind of work backwards, which is, throwing those blue light blocking glasses on at night, right? I am guilty as one of those people that still has their laptop on open after dinner, right? But so those dark blue light blocking glasses are going on immediately at night, and I am making sure that I'm gonna get in bed within kind of a nice 8 hour window before I wake up. I do ensure that when I wake up, you know. I am doing that hydration routine that I talked about, right? So I have electrolytes and creatine, and I'll even throw a little ketones in there as well. And that is the very first thing that I'm consuming. And then I try to do that with enough time to make sure that that's hydrating my cells so I can then go work out in the morning, right? And that's kind of where I'm at in the stage of life. I have a toddler, so that is my quiet, protected time. Is first thing in the morning, but that's kind of the morning routine when I'll have a nice balance. Earlier in my career, I talked about being a competitive triathlete, and then I got into kettlebell lifting. Now in this stage of life, I try to keep it very well balanced. 3 to 4 sessions of cardio a week, 3 to 4 sessions of resistance exercise training, and then I'll throw in some 1 to 2 sessions of yoga in there as well. All right, so those are kind of my non-negotiables. Saturday and Sunday, kind of on a macro level, is food prep day, right? We try to do some food prep within the house to make sure that we can run a fast-paced life, but still eat healthy and never kind of be caught without healthy food choices to make. So that is part of kind of the weekly routine that kind of supports the daily routine to kind of run a fast-paced life and kind of recover. So admittedly, sometimes I don't do the best job of what I'd say dedicated stress management. I kind of go through those sort of, I am doing my meditation practice, or I do, I love gizmos and gadgets. So you're right. And I had like the brain tap before it was a cool
Yep.
thing to do. And, I'll go on spurts of doing that. And I could definitely be better in that realm of my routine. And like everyone, I'm probably about 80% with my supplements, right?
Yeah.
Today, got them in, but I'd say 5 days a week, I'm good about taking those supplements.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. Talking about the tapping, I'd forgot about that. I first learned about, because I was again trying to do more breath work and meditation. Dawson Church is kind of the guy that I first learned about, and I'm trying to get him on the show before. He's kind of like the guru of tapping and doing some of that stuff. And it's little things like that that whenever I tell people, are you doing breath work? Are you having some mindfulness that have such a unbelievable impact? I mean, it's more, a lot of times you don't have to take something. And then also on the training front, I know one of the things that I've done as I've gotten older, I finally got out of this mindset that I had to go and do a soul crushing workout every single day. I mean, I used to have this stupid mindset that I had to go crush 1,000 active calories every morning before 7 a.m. And I was just destroying my body. I mean, it's not good for your endothelial health, as I know you would know. It's not the stress of it. And so again, it's kind of like whenever I get the question about supplements, I ask people, well, go see somebody like Dr. Will Haas or somebody to figure out where you need to be on exercising. I tell people just do something and don't. And if it's causing you more stress, if you're dreading it and you don't want to do it, hey, that stress you're putting on yourself is probably worse than anything else. So just don't make it drudgery. That's one of the things that I've tried to tell people.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, all right. So before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests, I want to make sure that is there any burning topic that we haven't covered? I am thrilled that more physicians like you are coming along to get these conversations going about peptides, about toxins, about how important nutrition is, that food is in fact medicine, that moving your body. Is there anything that this audience, because they've got you right now, I mean, let's just look at this as a kind of a mass consultation. We've got Dr. Will Haas here with us, that you'd like to tell this audience, and anything that we haven't covered that you want to raise your hands and say, hey, Jason, I'd really like to talk about this before we go. Is there anything that we've missed?
We covered a wide range of things. I'm really happy with kind of what we talked about, and especially in terms of just kind of laying this framework and foundation of how we think through optimizing cellular health, or at least how I think through it. And so, if anything, just taking away those points around making sure that you kind of focus on managing cellular energy so you can repair and optimize, but then make sure you're also looking at what sort of toxins pollute the ability to create that clean energy. And I think you have a solid foundation to work on.
Excellent. Now, how can people get in touch with you? And do you have health coaches on staff, or can people work with you remotely? How do people find you, learn more about you? How do they do that?
Yeah, fantastic question. Easiest place is just to hit the main website, Vive Wellness, VYVE wellness.com. Go up to the Get Started button. We do have a little cellular health quiz assessment on the homepage as well. Both places will funnel you into a free discovery call with my team. We do very much work brick and mortar, so a lot of our patients will kind of start the lab process remotely, and then we come in and establish and care in person. And then once we establish and care in person, we can continue remotely as well.
Excellent. Dr. Haas, this has been excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime. I would love to, one of the things I would love to do is I've got a lot of people that I talk to that are their friends or that I've just met that have reached out to me through the show. Maybe we I need to start reaching back to all these amazing doctors like you that I've talked to and have some live Q&A, just with you guys. I mean, to be able to have your big brain on this show, I'm really grateful for it, man. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, welcome anytime, Jason.
All right, brother, thanks.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The Healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.